You're welcome to start, Chair.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this remote meeting at the Eastbourne Borough Council Planning Committee meeting on the 26th of January 2021. I'm Councillor Jim Murray, Chair of this committee. This is our sixth meeting to be held remotely in accordance with the published government regulations. For those participating in the meeting or watching it on the live stream, please bear with us if we have any technical difficulties. I will now take agenda items 1 to 3 together. Introductions, attendance and substitutes and declarations of interest. So can I ask now my fellow committee members to introduce themselves to listeners via a roll call. This is to be done in alphabetical order in accordance with the published agenda, and I'll ask that each confirm their name and if they are acting as a substitute, and whether or not they wish to make any declarations of interest in any of the items on the agenda. Before I do so, I confirm that we have apologies from Councillor Jane Lamb, who is substituted by Councillor Metcalfe, and Councillor Diplock, who is substituted by Councillor Amanda Morris. So I'll go through your names. So Councillor Robin Maxted.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. Councillor Robin Maxted, Upperton Ward. I have no interest to declare. Thank you.
Councillor Paul Metcalfe, MBE.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Paul Metcalfe, Sovereign Ward, and I have no interest to declare.
And you're substituting for Councillor Lamb.
Indeed I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Haran Mir. Need to unmute yourself, Councillor Mir.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good evening to everyone. This is Councillor Haran Mir of Langley Ward, and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Morris. I'm substituting Peter. Councillor Diplock, and I have no interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Colin Murdoch, Ratton Ward. No interest to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Barry Taylor, Meads Ward, and I have no interest to declare.
And Councillor Vaughan.
Good evening. I'm Councillor Vaughan, Langley Ward, and I have no declarations.
Thank you. Also joining us are the officers, Mr. Palmer, Lee Palmer, Interim Head of Planning, Neil Collins, Specialist Advisor for Planning, and Mrs. Helen Monaghan, Planning Lawyer, who are in attendance to present the reports and respond to any questions from the members. Democratic Services Officer Emily Horn is also in attendance, and other Democratic Services officers are assisting in the background of this meeting. Please can I ask all participants to ensure their microphones have been muted when not speaking, and if you have any connectivity issues, you may find it to help to turn off your camera when not speaking. All participants are reminded to not take calls on their mobile phones during the course of the meeting. I'll now take you through item 4, the minutes. I will take it that there is no objections with your silence. So if everybody is happy with the minutes, stay silent. So the minutes on the 15th of December 2020 are as a correct record, and the minutes have been approved. Agenda item 5, urgent items. There are no items to be considered of an urgent matter. Now, to ensure that all parties are clear as to the councillor's constitution, the committee is not in a position to accept any new additional documentation sent to us electronically today, although previously submitted documents will be will be referred to as part of the officer's representation when appropriate. For those unfamiliar with the procedure of planning applications, first there is a presentation by the planning officers. Then we would normally hear public speakers. However, live public speaking has temporarily been suspended during remote meetings. Instead, public speakers have been invited to send in their speeches, which will be read out by an officer. Any received will be heard in this order. Up to one speech from objectors, 3 minutes. Up to one speech from supporters, 3 minutes. And one speech from a ward member, again, 3 minutes. The committee is then invited to discuss the application, and I will ask members to raise their hands if they wish to speak. Can all councillors, officers and participants please clearly state their name each time they speak, so that there is a clear to members of the public listening who is speaking. Once all of the committee members who wish to speak on an application have done so, I will ask if there is a proposer and a seconder for the officer's recommendation. If so, we will move to the vote. If the officer's recommendation is lost, I will ask for an alternative proposal. I will ask the proposer to state the planning reasons for their proposal and ask whether we have a seconder. If necessary, I will seek the officer advice on the reasons given and provide the proposer the chance to respond and confirm their proposal. If this is seconded, we will then vote on the item. To vote, I will call each name of each committee member present in alphabetical order. Please clearly state whether or not you are for or against or abstaining from that particular vote. Members must not leave the room during their live meeting. It is essential that members are present for the entire presentation and discussion of the application to be able to vote on that item. If a member very briefly loses their internet connection, this may not disqualify them from voting or on the item, provided they seek clarification as to anything they may have missed as soon as possible after they have reconnected. So if you do lose connection for a couple of minutes, for a few seconds, please let me know that you've missed out a section of the discussion, and I will get the officers or the members to go back over that item again. If you lose connection for any period of time over about 2 minutes, then you will be discounted from being able to vote on that particular item. Agenda item 6, application number 200909, proposal erection of a coffee shop with drive-through facility, replacement car parking and associated works. Site address Hampden Park Retail, Marshall Road, Eastbourne, Ward, Hampden Park. And with that, I will hand over to Mr. Neil Collins, who will run us through the prelims.
Thank you, Chair. Neil Collins, Senior Specialist Advisor within the planning team. I'll just share my screen in the presentation. Chair, can I just ask that you can see that?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic, thank you. So I'll get on this one. This is in the Hampden Retail Park. Members will be aware that where that is in the borough. On the screen at the present time is the application site. I apologise in advance for the slightly fuzzy nature of this picture, which seems to be a bit fuzzy in this presentation, but it shows the outline of the application site in red. And just for some bearings in relation to where this site is, members will be aware of Lockbridge Drove, which runs through here. This is Marshall's Roundabout, Marshall's Road. This is the site in question. It is a Eastbourne Borough Council owned site, and the access to the site is from Marshall's Road, where my cursor is now. So a couple of other views of the site. This one from Marshall's Roundabout. As you can see, it's a retail park, predominantly a retail functioning site. This aerial shot shows the outline red application site and the car park forming the basis of this application. The existing site layout, as I mentioned previously, accessed from the highway, the public highway from Marshall's Road, down in the southern corner of the site. The application site is predominantly the car parking area, which is a hard surfaced area with some soft landscaping around the periphery of the site. This application follows an extant permission, and the extant permission was for 3 units, which is going to be shown on the screen here. 2 retail units and drive-through facility, which is a single-storey building with associated car flow arrangement and landscaping. And this formed part of an application which also included improvements generally to the site, including improvements to the car parking and the landscaping. Moving on to this proposal and just explaining the reason for a further proposal on this site. The 2 former extant permission retail units have been omitted at this point in time due to financial constraints. It is still intended for a drive-through facility to be commenced and implemented on the site, and that's shown here in a different location as proposed as part of this application. The reason for the alternative location is that there are some drainage complications, below ground work that would require or be preferred in a different location on the site. Essentially, the proposal involves the same form of building, a single-storey building, 165 square metres gross internal floor space, and as I said previously, the associated traffic flow works. Also proposed as part of this application is general improvements to the car parking and the flow and landscaping of this site. So that's in order to improve the quality of the car parking arrangement on the site, but also for environmental improvements in terms of the boulevard area outside of the retail units and of the landscaping works around the periphery of the site. This particular plan forms part of the pack that members have had sight of, and as per the addendum that has been forwarded to committee members, there has been a revision, and that includes an improvement, or rather an increase, in the provision of trees on the site by way of a number of trees, 5 trees within the car parking area. That does have an impact on the provision of parking, so there would be 5 fewer spaces, and you can see toggled between those 5 spaces and the trees that would be provided. Some elevations of the Costa Coffee unit as would be in line with the branding of that chain, single-storey unit showing its relationship to the highway, and the other elevations shown on the other side of the building. Just a further view to show where that would be located within the site and its views of the site from the surrounding Lockbridge Drove road network. And one more from within the site. I'll just go back to this shot, and just to inform members that there is improvements to the pedestrian access of this site and also to cycles parking spaces, which 12 of which would be provided. The application is recommended for approval subject to conditions, but what is on the table for members to consider at this stage is the 2 options. One with the additional trees within the car park, and one without. There is a trade-off, as I mentioned, in terms of the provision of the 5 trees, because there would be fewer car parking spaces, but it is open for either of those plans to be approved with this application. And that concludes the presentation. I'll hand back over to the chair now. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we've already seen this kind come to us before, so we've had some discussion around it. It's on my patch, but I will defer to the committee before I make any comments. So who would like to speak first? Am I able to? Councillor Taylor, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, first of all, can I say that I welcome this change to this application? Yes, we all sat on the original application. Some points. I personally, I think we could do with some trees there. It certainly would be an improvement, although one of the reasons I wasn't particularly happy last time was the loss of car parking. Now, the officer has just referred to the Astent application, which was previous. And with that, we were losing the car parking next to the vacant. I'm assuming now that's not going to happen. Eastbourne Borough Council now is not going to build another retail unit in that position. The officer can answer later, but and because, for instance, the entrance and exit of that particular site originally was going to be moved up and almost make a crossroads with the entrance into the rest of the site around Dunelm and so forth. And the position that this new development is going to take place is actually quite a vacant part of the car park. And I think that for that reason, I think this is a much better application, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mr. Collins, can you just clarify that the car parking spaces won't be lost near where the Halfords shop is?
Thank you, Chair. The extant permission is extant because it can still be implemented. As concluding this meeting and any grant of planning permission for this particular application would be alongside the extant permission. It is not envisaged that those units would be coming forward soon, but they could still be implemented within a year. So we have until January to implement that permission. That can still take place whether this planning permission is granted or not. So there is a potential outcome that the grant of this application would be alongside and would see both of those, or in both of those in part, come forward as a more comprehensive scheme.
Thank you. Councillor Metcalfe.
Thank you, Chair. It's Paul Metcalfe, Councillor Paul Metcalfe. I just would like to add to what Councillor Taylor has mentioned. I think it is a very, very good proposal to see the coffee drive-in added to the retail park at Hamden Park. And I note that in paragraph 632, this is the start of the council's transformation of the site. And I think this will add a lot to this particular site. And I'm very pleased to see the trees being added. Great lover of seeing trees added rather than taken away, as we see so often. And I would totally support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxted.
Thank you, Chair. Picking up on Councillor Taylor's point, I'm all in favour of the extra trees. I mean, isn't anybody? But of course, that comes at a cost of car parking spaces. The addition of this coffee shop and drive-through facility is going to increase car parking, and the council still has this extent permission to develop that corner, which would lose more car parking. So you're increasing the uses in this area, and the potential is still there to reduce the amount of car parking spaces. Now, I mean, I've been up there as we probably all have been, and I've never seen the car park full. So maybe there is an over provision for car parking, but it is something that I feel should have been considered by Eastbourne Borough Council in this application. They should have had some tie-in with this extent term permission that they already have. And but anyway, I mean, they haven't. So that's perhaps I don't know whether anybody can actually answer that. One thing that I would like to say is, of course, this is an application on behalf of Eastbourne Borough Council's application, and Eastbourne Borough Council has committed to carbon neutral by 2030, and so drive-throughs are notoriously polluting. There actually hasn't been that much that many studies done on it, but there was one done last year, and if you just bear with me, Chair, just it was carried out by Coventry University, and one sample at a Costa Coffee. It could have been another coffee drive-through place, but this one was at a Costa Coffee. This was in Taunton. It showed NO2 levels reaching 16 times the legal limit when averaged out across the year. Now, this was due to idling of cars, queuing up to get their coffees and waiting whilst it was, so the engines were idling constantly. And this could cause not only the staff a problem in these who work in these areas, because I mean it might be covered to a certain degree, but also the car drivers themselves. So I think there's a serious health implication here, and also it's not really along the lines of Eastbourne Borough Council's commitment to carbon neutrality by 2030. And so I was there was again, if you could bear with me, Chair, Costa Coffee responded to this, and they said measures were already in place to protect employees' health, and more measures could be imposed in the future. They take health of their team members extremely seriously. Our store teams are instructed to take regular breaks every 4 hours. We're also reviewing future signage to encourage drivers. Now, I understand, of course, this isn't an application by Costa Coffee, but it's something I think they've addressed the problems that there may be. And I was wondering, as this is an Eastbourne Borough Council development, what pressures we could put on Eastbourne Borough Council for them to mitigate this additional pollution caused by this drive-through coffee place. Indeed, if they really want to have a drive-through. So I was just wondering whether anybody else has got any ideas about that, or whether Mr. Collins can help me. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously, with it being in my ward, I've done a little bit of research into Costa's Coffee myself. So they pride themselves on having quite green credentials with their actual buildings when they put these new buildings up. So they try and build to carbon neutral when they're actually doing the building works. Once the customers start going in there, then obviously the carbon levels go up, because you've got something which they can't control whilst they're in there. But the actual building works themselves are designed to be carbon neutral, so that's quite a good asset for them. With it being on our patch and on a piece of land that we own, we can put extra signage up and things as well. So that's something which I will be pushing for if we perceive that we've got a problem down there. The trees in the car park are very important as far as I'm concerned. You know, it's one, it's planting more trees, and two, it improves the look of the whole area. We've got 2 electric charge points going up in that new car park as well. So there'll be 2 new electric charge points, and the facilities to put in another 21 if needed. So what we're hoping is that the taxi drivers are going to go up there, get their cup of coffee, sit in the car park and charge their cars up. And with our drive for carbon neutrality, so carbon neutrality for 2030, we're hoping that there's going to be a lot more electric cars in Eastbourne by the year 2030, which should then reduce the amount of idling traffic that we've actually got in the car park. So it's a tricky one at the moment, but looking to the future, we can't see a major problem with this. It will certainly keep my wife happy. She can't go more than about 100 metres without having a cup of coffee in her hand, so we'll be able to grab one on the way out and on the way home. Councillor Taylor, you came back with another comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, I do understand Councillor Maxted's worries, but you've already stolen a bit of what I was going to say. Let's put the trees in. Why not? And if they're needed to come out because of the overwhelming transport to the site, then they can actually be removed. But of course, I know Eastbourne Borough Council is very ambitious in having carbon free by 2030. In my view, more realistic to be 2050. But nevertheless, we are moving towards carbon free vehicles, electric vehicles, and let's hope and let's work towards the fact that we need transport. We're not all going to ride bikes or walk to these places. We'll need transport, and that transport needs to be electric or emission free. So this is the right step, and it doesn't matter if there's, as you say, charger points for taxi companies, or I'm assuming for anybody to go up there and charge their car while they're shopping, or even when they go to church maybe. But I certainly feel that it's still a very good application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'm keen to sort of follow the council's policy on trying to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030, but I think we should avoid sort of trying to make comments, political comments against it, if we possibly can, please. I just saw a load of hands go up there after you made that comment, Councillor Taylor. So I'm just heading off the charge if there is one. Councillor Mear.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, right, okay. Well, it's not a big deal. I was going to talk about. I'm quite happy with the change of this particular area, which was in the past, obviously, was in a different place. Now they've come to an end side. The two things which reminds me, the entrance. Of course, during the evening, it'll be all right, because through the day, there are loads of lorries passes through from this Marshall Road of the whole of the industrial area. The second thing, it's quite a low land. If we look just opposite, where in front of in the Willingdon Grove side, it really floods in this corner of the roundabout, opposite the King's Church. So it's really quite a concern about the flooding area to me. I don't know how good we are and what they're going to do about it as long as they clear this side. I'm quite happy to accept what's there. It looks nice because it reminds me of the LD, which was a real dead end in a kind of dark area there. But since this LD went in, this corner has become quite bright. Obviously, the Lottery Authority or Lottery pub went away, and that's been building houses. But on this side, I'm quite happy to go for the drive-through. It's not because I'm a taxi driver by trade, but also this corner is going to get brighter with the Morrison's opposite, all the other shops in the corner there. So I'm not going to bring up any of the objections, but I'm quite happy to go for it. That's all. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Collins, there was a couple of points there that perhaps you could clarify. Extra traffic going in there because of the cost of coffee, and flood mitigation, which I wouldn't think affects it on the roundabout, but if you could clarify for me, please.
Okay, yeah. So thank you, Joe. There's two issues coming from the transport that I picked up there. The first is, I think, safety. In terms, I think there was a mention of large heavy goods vehicles using that area. The transport, the arrangement in terms of the access to the site would not change. So it's not considered to be any different in terms of safety for vehicles. In terms of the number of vehicles, there is an anticipated increase in the trip generation that would be directly resulting from the proposed development. That's contained within a submitted transport assessment, and that assessment concludes that against the TRICS database, which is a national database for these types of uses, the anticipated number of trips that would be generated by way of any particular use. It is anticipated that this would be in line with what we would expect of a drive-through facility, and for that reasons, the recommendation is for approval. The other issue to do with flood risk, I draw members' attention to a consultation response from the Environment Agency in relation to flood risk. There is a flood risk assessment that's been submitted with the application. The Environment Agency have recommended condition, and that's at paragraph 10.5, and that just ensures that the flood risk assessment is implemented in accordance with the scheme. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. Of course, one of the reasons why the Costa Coffee is going there is to encourage more trips to that particular part of town, so that we try and encourage more footfall in the actual local shops. So it's not going to be a huge amount of extra traffic, but that is one of the reasons why the Costa Coffee is going there. Councillor Maxted, you did have your hand up there. It's gone back up again, so I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to clear up. I don't have any problem with the extra trees. It was just a matter of the extent permission that Eastbourne Borough Council has got to develop that site next to the vacant unit would then put a squeeze on availability of car parking spaces. Certainly don't have a problem with trees. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And I've driven past that site 3 or 4 times every day for the last 30 years, and it's never been full. So, Councillor Morris.
Hi, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to say I think it's great. I think it's a really good idea and much needed down there. And I just wanted to remind everyone there is a cycle route that goes right past that. I know that because I cycled there 2 or 3 times a week. And to have those 12 extra cycling spots is perfect because it is very well used cycle route down there. I go there with my daughter a lot, so for us to be able to nip in for a coffee on our bikes and park our bikes up, hopefully more people will do that, and that because you can cycle straight onto Shinewater Park, go to Hampden Park if you're other way, go up to the seafront. Hopefully that will encourage more people to get on their bikes, go grab a coffee and then go for a bike ride, so I'm all for it.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, I don't see any dissent from... Oh, Councillor Murdoch, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things. With the trees, they can be planted within parking spaces, so not to lose parking spaces, and just have short parking spaces, which we do in our multi-storey car parks for those smaller cars. So really, we wouldn't maybe have to lose car parking spaces. Because if you was to take 4 and plant a tree within the middle, hopefully you've got them 4 short car parking spaces, and hopefully cars are getting smaller anyway if they're going to become electric. And the only other thing, because I've had situations around the town, as this is a drive-through coffee and it's liquid, is there any facilities or toilet facilities going to be put on? Because if I look at this complete area, I'm not sure if there's any toilet facilities anywhere, if that's the case. Thanks. That's for Neil to answer. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Collins.
Thank you. Sorry, just coming back to you. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so there's two things that were picked up there in terms of the provision of trees. There is a plan available for approval by members. There is another option if members so choose, and we could delegate to officers to negotiate a different arrangement in terms of the provision of trees, perhaps to attempt to try to have some form of spaces, whether they be for motorcycles, for example, or something of that nature. Yeah, that is an option open. In terms of the toilet facilities, I'm afraid I don't have that information available to members to be able to give back in this meeting.
Thank you. Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you. Councillor Vaughan, Langley Ward. After living in Hampden Park for a long time, I think you'll find that there are toilets at Dunelm, and there are also toilets in Morrison's Cross Road. So that's 2 spots for toilets if anybody needs it. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, and perhaps your indulgence, I'd like to propose approval for this with the trees. We can sort of put the delegated powers into the hands of the officers to sort of negotiate where best to place them to minimise the loss of car parking spaces. But definitely want the five trees in there, more if you can get them. And Councillor Mia, are you coming in to second me?
Yes, I will second you, but also as a conditional, as Councillor Vaughan has already mentioned. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Yes.
Okay, right. There are toilet facilities in the Dunelm and Morrison's, but they shut quite early. But in the evening, obviously, this coffee facilities, I don't know if it's 24 hours or not. If it is, then they will definitely need a toilet facilities there. So I would certainly push for that if there is no condition in there, if that can be put in or talk it through. But I'll definitely second you, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Mr. Palmer, you're flashing over there. Did you want to say something? Take your silence as no. As far as I know, if you're a food outlet or a cafe, you have to provide toilet facilities anyway. So, so I'm fairly certain that will be the case. So we have a proposer who is myself. We have a seconder who is Councillor Mia. I'm going to move to a named vote because we are digital. I'll call out your name. Please say whether or not you are for, against, or abstain. So, so this is for the application with the 5 trees, with delegated control to the officers to negotiate where they go best.
Chair, Emily Horn, committee officer speaking. Can I also ask you just to check with the committee, ask them just to confirm whether they've lost internet connection during the course of the item as well. Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me. So when you say your name and your vote, can you please at that point say I have not lost connection, unless of course you have. So Councillor Robin Maxted.
Thank you, Chair. I've not lost internet connection and I am for.
Thank you. Councillor Metcalfe.
I am for and have not lost internet connection.
Thank you. Councillor Mia.
I am for and I have not lost my internet connection.
Councillor Morris.
I'm for and I have not lost my internet connection.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch.
I am for and have not lost my internet connection.
Councillor Taylor.
I'm for and I have not lost any internet connection.
Thank you. Councillor Vaughan.
I am for and have not lost any internet connection.
And I, Councillor Jim Murray, will also be voting for, and I have also not lost any internet connection. So with that, application number 200909, proposed erection of coffee shop with drive-through facility, replacement car parking and associated works is being granted. We'll now move over to agenda item number 7, which is the item number 190706, proposal for outline application for proposed new access for Pennine Way to serve development land at Friday Street Farm. And I'll hand over to Mr. Lee Palmer, who will talk us through the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to remind members, the application site for us in Eastbourne fronts Pennine Way that runs along here, along with my cursor. The area shaded, the buff brown colour, is in our neighbouring authority, Wealdon District Council. The application is in 2 parts. One, we have the access which is down in this part of the site. Everything to the north of that is in our neighbouring patch, Wealdon District Council, and members will be aware that Wealdon have resolved to grant planning permission, so they are satisfied that everything that lies to the north of the access meets their planning requirements. So the issue left for members is in relation to the access, and members will recall when this item was reported at the last committee in November that the engineering solution in terms of the access into the site is acceptable, and there are no grounds for resistance to the scheme on highway grounds in terms of the access into the site. Members will recall that in the November committee, committee deferred the consideration of the item to enable officers to go and liaise with colleagues at County and Wealdon, such that Eastbourne Borough Council could engage meaningfully on the Section 106 agreement that ties certain activity at the site. I'm pleased to say that Eastbourne Borough Council are now signatories to that legal agreement, and we have controls over elements of the development, specifically in relation to enforcement powers if we need them. Subsequent to the 106, County Council changed their recommendation in terms of the Pennine Way works. Now, in relation to their initial concerns, the concerns from County were around the fact that the vision displays into the access were not sufficient enough for the speed of the road. So the County Council's position previously was that the highway works that are highlighted on your papers were required to reduce the speed levels to make this junction safe in highway safety terms. Now, County have rescinded that position, and they are now satisfied with a condition that Wealdon are looking to impose, a construction management plan that will ensure that the site access is safe for construction vehicles, and the access in terms of, you can see here, and the other mitigation along Pennine Way in county highway terms will be delivered pre-occupation. So when the new homeowners move in, that's when the road, speed and the other infrastructure in Pennine Way will be delivered. We have been negotiating since November to understand from Wealdon and County the issue about the wider highway network. Members will recall, and it's highlighted in your addendum papers, that there are other highway works that are required to mitigate the impacts of this scheme. County Highways have confirmed that some of those works have been completed. They have also confirmed that in one respect, in relation to the roundabout at Golden Jubilee Way, there is a deficit in the money available to do those works. So I can't report to members now that there is full funding for those wider strategic works. If I can quickly take members to the addendum paper, and specifically the bottom of page 2, County Council have reaffirmed their position that they would require a condition, or recommend to us that it would be appropriate to have a condition that requires full funding arrangements to be provided to support those wider works. And further at the bottom, the agent has gone on to say that the actual trip generation from this site to the roundabout is negligible in highway terms, and for them, they do not see that it is necessary for those highway works to be implemented. The agent has confirmed that they will be fully funding the Pennine Way improvements, and the agent is satisfied that those Pennine Way options are to be delivered pre-occupation. So, Chairman, through you, there are 4 options that are highlighted in your addendum papers. Option 1 is to go with the recommendation as tabled. So Pennine Way works to be pre-commencement, if members feel that the highway safety issue is paramount. Second, that the wider strategic network is pre-occupation. Option 2 says that Pennine Way could be prior to occupation and the wider strategic work prior to occupation. Option 3, members may consider that it is satisfactory to have the Pennine Way works pre-occupation and leave the wider highway network works to happen when the funding arrives. Or option 4 is to defer determination of the application to explore more fully the arrangements around the strategic highway works. Now, just to recap, we have been in constant contact with colleagues at Wealden and at County Council. County Council have confirmed that for them there is a finance deficit for those works, and Wealden as yet have not confirmed that the monies are available to the extent to deliver those works. Chairman, that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a request to speak, which has been received from Councillor Shuttleworth. I will now call upon Councillor Shuttleworth to introduce himself and read his speech. Councillor Shuttleworth, you have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak. You will be timed by the Democratic Services Officer, and if you exceed your time limit, you will be asked to stop. When you're finished, please turn off your video and mute your sound. Thank you. When you're ready, Councillor Shuttleworth, off you go.
Before I start my 3 minutes, can I just confirm that you can hear me, Councillor?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I speak on behalf of the residents of Langley and many others who oppose building on this unique piece of green belt and recognise the enormous impact in terms of traffic congestion, pollution, damage to the environment and to protected species, as well as the flooding impact and inadequate pumping and wastewater sewage arrangements. Following 170 representations, planning permission was refused and then subsequently disgracefully overturned at Wealden Council, despite it breaching the current Wealden local plan, which excludes housing on this land. I understand the issue tonight is around the access from Pennine Way and the impact of the huge increase in traffic on the road network. There are already significant delays as Pennine Way is the only road in and out of the area, which already has around 1,400 people living there. The pressure on Pennine Way and Friday Street and beyond would increase enormously. I'm asking the committee to refuse planning permission, option 5, on the grounds that the additional traffic will cause an unacceptable severe impact without the necessary mitigations, which are not guaranteed. East Sussex Highways say that planning permission should not be granted if there is no confirmation of the full funding arrangements for those important works at those junctions. The highway submission states that uncertainty over delivery of these mitigation works would justify an objection on the grounds of the severe impact at the junctions. You've heard that there is a £2 million deficit on monies to provide these absolutely vital improvement works. East Sussex County Council has confirmed that they do not hold the necessary funds and traffic improvements are, in their words, some way off. Wealden Council has indicated that sufficient SIL funds have not been secured. The committee must recognise this funding uncertainty, therefore permission must be refused. There is even further uncertainty over the proposed condition to carry out the traffic calming works in Pennine Way. East Sussex Highways have now rescinded on their advice that this should be completed prior to the start of the work. Traffic calming has been needed for years, but residents don't want more empty promises. We also have the results of capacity assessments on other junctions which show overcapacity issues at peak times. In light of all the evidence, the Planning Committee must follow the Highways advice and refuse permission due to the likely severe impact on the surrounding road network if this development is approved without guarantees on the funding for all the required mitigation works. I ask you to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the options that's not on the table at the moment is refusal, but we do have deferral on the table. Because we've already had this discussion beforehand, we've already spent some time at the last meeting sort of going through discussing what we would like to have happen at this site, and we came away from there delegating power to the officers to go away and make sure that all of the works to mitigate all of the traffic controls and things in the area would be done pre-commencement of works. At the time of going to pre-agenda, it looked as though that was going to be the case, which is why it's come to us now. Since that time, the Wealdon Council have come back and said that actually, no, we haven't got the money in place and we're looking for preoccupation. So preoccupation means potentially that they can have certain, up to sort of 20 or 30 houses already built before the roadworks actually commence in this particular area. That is not what we asked for at the last committee meeting. What we're after is that Wealdon Borough Council go away and they come back with a firm offer of all the funding in place and make sure that all the roadworks have been done pre-commencement of works on that site. In the light of that, I would like to suggest that we go straight to a deferment vote now, rather than open up the discussion which we had some months ago. Sorry, a month or so ago. I'm more than happy for it to go to a discussion, but I feel as though we've already been here, and what I'd like to do is defer it so that it goes back to the officers, and the officers come back with the offer that we asked them to come back with this time round. Councillor Maxted.
Thank you, Chair. If that was a proposal for option 4, I'm quite happy to second it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mia.
To be precise, that's what I was going to do. I was going to second it. But of course, as the speaker has already mentioned, those reasons are very important. And as you have already said everything, so I don't have nothing to say. I was going to second it, but it's okay. Councillor Maxted can do that for me. Thank you.
Thank you. So if there's nobody else who would like to speak, I think that we can send quite a clear message back to Wealdon now by saying we've already had this discussion. You know what we're asking for. We want all works to be done prior to commencement, and we want to make sure that all the funding is in place to be able to do all of these works. So with that, I will take the vote for deferral. I have myself proposing and Councillor Maxted seconding. When I call out your name, please state that you've not been disconnected and whether or not you are for, against, or abstaining for the deferral. Councillor Maxted.
I'm for the deferral and I didn't lose internet connection.
Thank you. Councillor Metcalfe.
I am for the deferment and I have not lost internet connection.
Thank you. Councillor Mia.
Sorry, yeah. I am for and I have not lost my internet connection.
Thank you. Councillor Morris.
I am for and I have not lost my internet connection.
Thank you. Councillor Murdoch.
I am for the deferral and have not lost my internet connection.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
I'm for the deferral and I have not lost internet connection. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr.
Councillor Vaughan.
I'm for the deferral and have not lost any internet connection.
Thank you. And I myself, Councillor Jim Murray, am for the deferral and I also have not lost any internet connection. So application number 190706 has been deferred back to the officers to do what we mentioned last time. Thank you. Item number 8 is the planning application for performance and appeal record for the year 2020. Mr. Palmer has the report. Emily, can you help me here? Do we let Mr. Palmer give the report first, or does Councillor Smart speak first?
Chair, if you would like the officer, Mr. Lee Palmer, to present the report, and then Councillor Smart may speak on the item. So over to Lee Palmer first.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, Lee Palmer, Head of Planning for Eastbourne Planning Department. Quick canter through the headlines from the report. Para 2.7 and 2.9 indicate the speed of processing of applications against the national government target. The national government target is the left of the figure. The right-hand figure is our annual close down of performance. So a very big commendation to Neil Collins and his team for delivering a very high level of performance in regard to those national PIs. Moving on to 2.16, the performance in terms of major overturned appeals. Members will note that we are above the threshold PI at the national level, and hence we received the letter that also appended to your paper from the government minister, highlighting that this for them was a significant area of concern. Moving through the paperwork, in relation to table 1, bottom of page 49, I'm pleased and encouraged to see that the right-hand column is the area of high volume appeal decisions. And why is that important? Well, it means that officers, committee and the appeals inspector are all on the same page. So when we report the appeal decisions, it's that right-hand column that should have the largest number within it. Moving through to the 4.1, the appeal costs. Members will be aware that in certain circumstances, in relation primarily to unreasonable behaviour, costs can be awarded. Members will see that the council in the last calendar year received 2 cost awards against us. One was a committee decision and one was a delegated decision. The delegated decision officers ran a highways reason for refusal that the appeals inspector found was unsubstantiated, and therefore we acted unreasonably. The committee decision, members may recall the houses behind Langley Shopping Centre, where they promoted the subdivision of a large bedroom into a study and a smaller bedroom. Committee resisted that application on the size of the bedroom that was left. The appeals inspector felt that that was unreasonable to resist it for that ground, and costs were awarded against that issue. The table at the bottom of page 50, members, please note that we not only have a falling application number that is probably due to the government changes in permitted development, and also in the lead of the pandemic, but also the important thing is that we are still approving 90% of the applications that we receive. Why is that important? Well, we know that that 90% of applications that we have approved, they are primarily small SMEs, small companies that deliver those home extensions that we endeavour to support. Those small SMEs purchase locally, they recruit locally, so it's valuable for us to continue supporting that at around the 90% level. Just in conclusion, Chairman, I'd just like to mention again the letter from the Ministry of Housing, Communities, Local Government that is attached to your papers. That is a very clear signal to us as officers and you as a planning committee to be mindful when we make decisions on major applications. Major applications are 10 units, residential units and above, primarily for this committee, and it is those that we need to be very, very careful of before we move to a refusal. Thank you, Chairman. Happy to take questions.
Thank you. We would go to Councillor Smart's speech first. Councillor Smart, you have 3 minutes to speak, as usual. Let me just check to make sure I'm giving you the right information. And if you exceed your time limit, I will ask you to stop. When you're finished, please turn off your video and mute your sound. So when you're ready, Councillor Smart.
Thank you, Chairman. To those who don't know me, I am Councillor Robert Smart, Councillor for Meads and Conservative Group Leader. I want to make a few comments on the appeal record. Broadly, I think we're pretty much on the same side, fighting for Eastbourne. First, in terms of the definition of major and non-major, thank you, Lee. You've answered one of my questions, which is the issue of 10 units. That's helpful. So of the 4 major applications overturned, 3 of them are in Meads and are core célèbres. We have discussed them several times. What a surprise then that having won the appeals, neither Kempston nor Meads Brow applicants are going ahead. Most pertinently, the owners of Kempston have changed their plans and will now refurbish the original building. Meads Brow has been sold on for future residents as it is. 2 points. One is it shows that we and the planning inspector should not be taken in by viability studies. The applicant for Kempston said refurbishment was not viable. Of course, now it is viable. Second, our perceived having a housing shortage is used as a threat to recommend applications when otherwise we would not. And I think that's a trouble for the committee and for the community. In the case of Meads Brow, the planning inspector cited it as a material consideration in accepting the appeal. In December, the government issued its response to changes to the current system. That's not the white paper, that precedes the white paper. However, in the absence of a local plan, there is no change to our perceived housing shortage, and we must soldier on as we are for the moment. With thanks to Matt Hitchens, our requirement, sadly, is still for 675 units per annum. This, as you know, is absurd. It compares to 1,440 housing land supply, existing unit permissions. I think there is generally a consensus that 200 or so is a reasonable number. I have been in communication with ministers and have written today to make our position clear, which we did during the council debate in November. We must work together, sadly, against some of the problems of this planning inspectorate, which uses it as a stick with which to beat us. I hope we won't have too many difficulties in the coming year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Useful comments. There was one comment there which I'd like Mr. Palmer to come back on, which was one of the big issues that we have as a planning committee, and you described it as being taken in by. Unfortunately, we can only act on the information that we are presented at the time. We have to assume that applicant is actually telling the truth and that they are looking to do whatever they say that they're going to do on the paperwork. For us to dismiss it would be at our peril, because that sort of leads us into the problems that we've come up against with Kempston Villas, where we sort of tried to object against it, and said that the applicant wasn't being reasonable. If he's got it down in paperwork and he's proved that it is reasonable, then there's not an awful lot that we can do. So, Mr. Palmer, if you could just sort of clarify that point for me in sort of more legal terms for me from a planning point of view, that would be useful.
Thank you, Chairman. And through you, yes, if there is any issue over viability, then the applicant would submit a viability statement. That statement is read and understood by officers, but more importantly for committee is we seek external independent verification of what is being put to us. So we will go to a RICS accredited surveyor who will comment independently on the veracity of the evidence that's being presented. and we will present that advice to you to enable you to make an informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things, Meads Brow, you picked up on there, Councillor Smart. Yeah, that one was one house which has been developed into, I think it was 15 flats, and it was an obvious overdevelopment and really shouldn't have happened. I think there was only 13 houses in the actual street itself, so it was massively overdeveloped. So we turned that down. Unfortunately, that got overturned. But now apparently there's a buyer from London who's come down, bought it, and he's just going to use it as his own domestic house. So I think we've just been fortunate in that particular case. And one of the things which I picked up from Mr. Palmer was a change in the times, which we as planning committee need to be aware of, and where we've always been careful about sort of allowing the developers to squeeze in an extra room, classing it as an office, knowing that they may turn it into an extra bedroom. It looks as though, because of the way things are nowadays, a lot of people are going to be home working, and so the inspectorate is looking to use to allow this going forward. So where in the past we may have got away with sort of saying no to this, we need to be able to be careful that this is not the case going forward. The house is going to be used for home office, and we may see some of these sort of slightly smaller rooms coming forward as offices rather than bedrooms. So just be wary of that. Those are my comments. I don't know if any of the other members have got any comments on the paperwork. As usual, a very good response from the officers. A good track record going forward as usual. A couple of hiccups. Mainly, two of those major applications came from Kempston Villas. So although we ended up with 4, 2 of them were Kempston. So that's where we sort of fell over in that particular case. I'm going to take your silence as everyone's happy. So the next meeting of this committee is scheduled to be held as a remote meeting at 6 p.m. on the 23rd of February 2021. The agenda is now completed. Thank you all attending. I close this meeting at 19:07. Thank you all very much for your time.